Locks are one part of my home that I've always been sceptical about making smart. I've always been worried that, what happens if the batteries run out? Are they easily hackable? Am I essentially installing an access all areas pass for sneaky burglars? But I'm starting to think that that fear was particularly irrational, and it's primarily thanks to the WELOCK Touch41, the first smart lock that I've ever reviewed, but one which is convincing me that smart locks may actually be something worth considering for many people. Now, one of my first concerns ultimately was about compatibility and how much of a faff it was going to be to install a smart lock. And what surprised me was the sheer ease of use. Seriously, I had this fitted in about 3 to 4 minutes. It was as simple as unlocking my current door, unscrewing the mounting screw that holds the existing lock barrel in place, removing the barrel and sliding the new one in, screwing on the back handle of the lock and replacing the mounting screw. That was it. Honestly, I had absolutely nothing to panic about. And the thing is, this is a particularly adaptable piece of equipment because you can either increase or decrease the length of the mechanism from the external or internal handle by using the small grub screws on each end. Interestingly, when adjusting the length, the front one has an absolute limit, whereas the back one is the one that can be entirely removed for fitting. Handy design, which I guess increases the security as it means the front one can't just be pulled off. In fact, there's videos circulating online and the manufacturer is actually trying to hammer it off a door without much luck at all, so I guess it's pretty robust. Of course, I don't want to do that to my own door because I quite like my door. I don't want to break it. But this adjustability means that it can fit into doors from 5 to 10 centimeters thick, which is far thicker than any door that I've come across in the standard home. And in terms of compatibility with that door, I would advise checking their website, which I'll link below, but I'm almost certain that 99% of the European UPVC style doors use this same locking mechanism, which means that it's highly likely it'll fit yours. But once in, the design is actually really neat and simple. Both the interior handle and exterior handle are large and easy to grip and twist, and both are made from stainless steel with the exception of the thumbprint scanner panel on the exterior handle. Aesthetically, it's unoffensive, but I think this design actually has some unrecognised advantages for people with poor motor skills or afflictions that affect grip like arthritis. It just means that it's easier to use than trying to fiddle around with a small lock or putting your key into the door, so it could be a real benefit for people in those situations. Now, the outside handle has the thumbprint scanner, but it also has a small status screen along with a button that activates the scanner. Now, at first, I wasn't so keen on the button, which you have to press to wake it up every time you want to scan your fingerprint, but I've actually warmed up to the idea of this button because if it were always on waiting for your prints, then it would consume more battery power. By essentially using the button to wake it up, you're saving battery and making it last longer. Now, the Touch41 runs on 3 AA batteries that WELOCK say will last a year on a single charge. These are placed in the front handle and are accessed by removing the grub screw, pulling the panel forward, revealing another Phillips screw that needs removing, and from that you then have access to the batteries. Now, having them in the front handle is actually a good design choice, acting as a little bit of a fail-safe. If you were to ever run out and you've somehow missed all of your notifications that WELOCK sent to your phone that the battery is going to run out, then you can just pop new ones in and it'll work straight away. But then again, on the other hand, it means it's pretty accessible for a burglar to come along and steal your AAA batteries. Although, as far as I'm aware, the theft of AAA batteries isn't particularly a prevalent problem in the UK, and I don't think they've got that much of a good resale value on the black market. Interestingly, when you open up the battery compartment, it also reveals a micro USB port which can be used to power the lock too, meaning if the batteries were to fail and you didn't have any available to replace, a portable battery pack can be used as a temporary alternative to make sure you can access the lock. And if you don't have access to either AAA batteries or a portable power pack, well, then you're quite frankly buggered and you'll be sleeping on your doorstep for the rest of the night. Or at least until you can get hold of a friend with a power bank or batteries to come to your aid. Now, once you've gotten the batteries in, to actually pair the device, you need a unique ID that's written on the barrel, which is another sweet little security feature that means without actually pulling it out of the lock, there's no way to pair the WELOCK to an app for installation and unlocking. The ID is lasered onto the barrel as well, so there's no chance it's going to get worn off or forgotten. Now, despite knowing this prior to installing, I stupidly installed it without writing the number down. WELOCK assumes that people will be complete Numpty Dumpties just like me, so they also have written the ID on the outside of the packaging it comes in, so make sure to destroy the packaging once you've paired it to the app. Now, the setup of the lock first requires you to set up an admin fingerprint by holding the set button for 5 seconds and then scanning the fingerprint that you want to use to unlock. Once that's set, the fingerprint then becomes the admin fingerprint, so if you wanted to add any further fingerprints or change some of the easy access settings using the inbuilt screen, then you would need to use this finger to scan first as the admin password. But I must say that I'm actually pleasantly surprised with how accurate and fast this scanner is. It works almost instantaneously, and so far I've not had it refuse a single scan. So much so that I actually became a little bit skeptical. I thought to myself, maybe it was just unlocking when it sensed any fingerprint, just like some of the really cheap fingerprint locks that you can get on Alibaba. So I tried another finger that hadn't registered with the lock, and you know what happened? It didn't work. So obviously, it really is accurate and really is quick. So a big thumbs up on the accuracy and speed WELOCK. It exceeded my expectations quite a bit here. Now, it would be important to mention at this point that the actual smart locking element doesn't actually lock your door. It essentially removes the ability for the handle to work, which is in replacement for a key. So for example, if my doors are locked and the WELOCK is also locked, the handle will just spin in perpetuity. By activating it and unlocking it with your fingerprint, it makes the handle function essentially as the key, so you can then twist to unlock. This essentially means that you can't remotely unlock or lock the actual door. You can only remotely unlock or lock the ability to unlock or lock the door, if you can get your head around that. But once you've got your first fingerprint set up and paired up to the app, there really is not much else to do. It's working straight away. And the app is really straightforward. It's not the prettiest app in the world, but it is functional. You can check the devices that you've authorized to unlock remotely, and you can add RFID cards, which WELOCK give you 3 of to use instead of fingerprint if you want it. You can also delete fingerprints as well as view the logs for when the lock was last used, or when it was last attempted to be used, which is very important because it lets me see if Ryan, our studio assistant, has tried escaping the basement again, because he's not allowed out of there. I've told him about that. Get down those stairs, you! Get down those stairs! But in all seriousness, I quite like this functionality because it allows you to single out the individual who accessed the lock if you ever need to. It's like a big log form. And it'll also send you a notification to your phone every time that it's unlocked so that you have real-time security updates. But there is a big but here. This notification element is only applicable if you have the Wi-Fi gateway that WELOCK sell, because the Touch41 unfortunately doesn't connect directly to the internet. If you don't have that, you're only able to communicate with it via your phone's Bluetooth, so you'd have to be in the local area. Now, this will also dictate whether or not you can pair it to your wider smart home with things like Alexa, which it supports, or Google Home, which is supposedly coming soon. Now, the gateway will set you back between £50 and £90 depending on the model you go for, and the lock itself will cost you £165. Now, this is perhaps a little more than I was expecting, but when I was writing this review, there was a discount available which took it down to £123, which is definitely more reasonable. And I haven't reviewed any other smart lock before, like I said earlier, so I haven't really got anything to compare the experience or the value against other products. So all I can say is that this lock really has changed my mind on the potential of integrating smart locks into my smart home. It's been a far better experience than I had anticipated, but as always, there's a few things that I think they could improve on and a few things that you probably need to consider when buying this lock. The first thing to take into account is the form factor, which could affect your ability to use this particular model. Now, this isn't something that I experienced. As I mentioned, I actually really like the form factor for its large and accessible design. And where I use it, I have zero problems. However, a good friend of the channel, Paul over at Hibbert Home Tech, had a really interesting issue with his in that the lock was too close to the frame of the door and ended up catching on the door unless the handle was turned at a 90-degree angle. Now, this is not the end of the world and it's not the device's fault. It's purely where you intend on using it and how far the actual lock is away from the door. So, as a very stern reminder again, make sure you check it out at the link below and measure and check several times to make sure that it's compatible to avoid disappointment. Now, the one thing I think is missing from the lock is a manual key entry option, just in case. This is limited, I guess, by the form factor of the lock, but for me to 100% give my body and soul over to smart locks, I think they should all provide an analog failsafe to cover the absolute worst case scenario where you ignore the warnings that the battery is running low and then stumble home at 3 AM after a night out only to find your lock out of power. And funnily enough, you didn't take 3 AAA batteries or a portable power bank out with you into town. These instances will be rare and few and far between, but if they did crop up, a simple analog key option would immediately crush those concerns that string of events might actually happen one day. And lastly, on future models, I would love to see the screen a little bit more readable. Now, I don't say this because it's small, because it's actually a pretty good screen, although it is actually small, but I'm saying it purely because of the angle and placement. It's squared up towards the sky, right up against the door. And this means unless you smush your head right against the door, on some of the 2-line messages that it gives you, the bottom line isn't readable. Perhaps the next iteration of the screen could be on the base, at the very end of the handle or something? I don't know. But those are the 3 things that I thought was worth mentioning. But aside from those, this has been a really good introduction for me into smart locks. From a security standpoint, I feel a lot more at ease than I did before. I genuinely can't see a way that this is easier to break into than the standard key barrel that was there before it. If anything, it possibly makes it harder because you can pick a lock that's open, but this leaves no visible access to the exterior of the barrel. Look, I could be wrong, and I'm sure the lock-picking lawyer might have something to say about it, but the simple fact that you're probably all forgetting is that it'll be a lot less effort for Harry and Marv to chuck a brick through the glass windows that it's attached to than try and break through a lock. And the last time I heard, burglars weren't carrying around Mission Impossible style hacking equipment or MI6 issue laser watches. So it's at least not made it any easier for burglars, and I can say that for sure. But what it has done is made it easier for me. I don't have to carry a key around with me all of the time to access the studio, and I don't have to spend 30 minutes trying to find my keys that have fallen down the back of the whiskey shelf just so I can lock up, because now my key is always on me. My thumb. So all in all, I think this one will be staying as part of my smart home for a good while. What do you guys think? Have you got a smart lock yourself? If so, what do you use? Let me know your recommendations so I can check them out. And equally, if you're still on the fence about smart locks, I want to hear your thoughts too. So make sure you drop down to the comments and leave a message. But other than that, guys, I will see you back for another episode of STU'S Reviews soon.